Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, September 1st, 2022. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello, and welcome to the podcast this week. First of all, if you're watching the video,
We're
apologize.
sorry. I mean, that's all I can say. But
you may have questions, is what I was about to say. You
full
may have
dad energy.
Many
like
questions.
We only bring forth characters that were on screen for 5 seconds or less on this channel anymore.
I feel like you should have just left it as no context and let people come to their own.
That could have worked as well. Well, you heard him chime in. Kishore, first of all, is here, of course, feeling a little green. And if you're just listening to the audio, what you do not know is Kishore logged on to our video chat as we are recording this in full makeup and costume, which was his, well, not his full costume, correct? I guess 75% costume, 80% of his costume that he wore at Silicon. This first costume at Silicon this past weekend. How you doing, Kishore? You recovered? You feeling a little under the weather? You look a little, discolored.
I'm doing great, partially because I got that con energy flowing through me, and also because this weekend I got to meet so many people that I'm fans of, including our guest this week.
Yes. Joining us on the podcast this week, someone who we met in person for the first time at Silicon. And it turns out, our deepest apologies, we've subjected to listening to this podcast for however many episodes now. It's Mike Corrie, aka Props to History. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you very much, Norm. Thank you, Kishore. I have been listening to this podcast, I think, pretty much since its inception.
No.
I have. It's one of my go-to podcasts, and when Kishore walked up to my booth at Silicon, I immediately recognized him. But for whatever reason, the worst thing for me to remember is names. So I was just struggling to remember his name when he first walked up to me. So, but yes, I have been an avid listener of this podcast for quite some time.
That's not how I remember it going exactly. I walk up and Freddie Stram, like a maker that deep cut fans of Tested will know. Freddie used to be Adam's assistant in the cave. Was at your booth, and we were talking for a while, and then like after a couple minutes, you're like, "Why do I recognize your voice?"
Well, I'd see that's part of
which
my
is like
own,
my form of like famedom. I think at this point,
it's part of my own awkwardness, because if I can't remember someone's name, I'm somewhat embarrassed to like say hello, because especially if I recognize them immediately. So I was just kind of stuck, like a record skipping, and I wasn't quite sure how to proceed. And then you were kind enough to introduce yourself, and then allowed me to go forward. So
well, if you don't mind me gushing about your channel, because Props to History is one of my favorite things on TikTok. It got me onto the platform because early on, like, I don't know, I may have been on TikTok like 2 weeks. I saw one of your videos and I was like, oh man, this algorithm knows me. It's already showing me like prop building videos. And what hooked me was that you tell these in this kind of short form format. You will just hold up a prop, and you will literally talk about its history and its place inside of movies. And it's usually something relatively obscure, but has some like character and story behind it. And I was hooked immediately. And so I'm an Uber fan. I have to tell you, my biggest glass shattering moment this weekend is I never knew your actual name. And when somebody told me, I was like, oh no. It's like seeing somebody's from the radio, like meeting them in person.
The veil has been lowered. Yeah.
And I was like, no, his first name is Props, middle name 2, History, last name. That's why he got this job.
A good friend of mine, actually, I had shirts made for Silicon that had my name on them. And there's a story behind why I have my name on my shirts anyway. But I posted it online, and he says, "Who is this Mike person? Your name is Props to History." And because most people for the longest time had no idea what my real name was. I didn't make it public. And then after a while, I realized that it didn't really matter that much. So then I just started using my real name. And it's funny how many people will just still call me Props or Props to History. And I'm fine with that. It's not the worst thing to be called in the world. I've been called far worse. And it's not bad.
It's a pretty good moniker, and especially in the emerging world, or now kind of the dominant world of TikTok, which is something I absolutely want to hear more about. I want to hear about some of the stories you've told on TikTok, on your YouTube channel. I want to dive deep into props and history. A few things that we are very interested here in this channel, but I want to also start off with a recap of Silicon. So last week we had Jen Schachter on, and we saw Jen 48 hours away from running the show, the Makerverse part of Silicon, and the weekend was a whirlwind. I don't know for you guys. I mean, we had it pretty easy over on here. Kishore and I, we kind of strolled in Saturday morning when it was already set up. There was teams there. You know, Ryan and Mel from our team had set up tested booth. Obviously, guests like you, Mike, had set up your booths, and all the vendors had set up. So we got to enjoy just walking into the convention and wandering around. And I don't know about you, but it went by so fast, and it was it was much fun.
It was lightning fast. It began and then it was over. And I'm glad that you mentioned her. Jen Schachter was the absolute glue that kept that whole thing from derailing. She was amazing from the very first moment that she reached out until the very end of the show, and even beyond that, and just absolute wonderful human being. But Silicon was actually my first con as a guest. I've never been a guest. I've never had a booth at a con before. So this was a whole new experience for me. But a lot of the people that were in the Makerverse, like Evil Ted and Steve and Scott from SKS Props, Frankly Built, Ben Eady, they were all friends of mine from before the con. Beverly Downen, Odin. And I got to meet more people within the Makerverse that I'd never met before, but had followed online, like Sophie Wong and Stephanie Chan. And it was so awesome to be able to interact with all of these people that are pretty much the same mindset as me. We all have that background as makers, as prop makers, as just all around just nerds who nerd out about nerdy things. And it was so much fun to spend all this time with these people. And then up walks Joel Telling, the 3D printing nerd and the 3D printing guy. And I've been friends with him for quite some time. And it was like hanging out with all of my friends and then making new friends while being at a con, and then Adam walks by. And that's just kind of how Silicon was. And it was just, like you said, it was started and then it was gone.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to paint a word picture a little bit of just the layout of the convention, because it's a medium-sized convention, nowhere near as big as your New York Comic Cons, your San Diego Comic Cons. It felt a little more intimate at the San Jose Convention Center. And typically, when you go to a convention, a pop culture convention, if you haven't been to one, if you're a listener out there, there's a main exhibit hall, and usually divided in a vendors area where you can buy things and retail. Whether it's collectibles or handmade objects. There's an artist alley area. So those are more just tables that artists are at that sell. There are stickers or drawings, keychains, things that they've made. And usually there's a celebrity section where there's a whole row of more kind of like lines for people to get autographs and photos with the flagship, the marquee guests. So your actors, here it was Christopher Lloyd and George Takei. But what was, I think, unique about this show is there was where you were at, Mike, which was the tables, the booths for the makers, where you guys weren't necessarily selling things, and you guys had a bigger presence than your typical artist alley table. And it was a full, it was like a 10 by 10 foot by 10 foot booth for each of you, where you could bring examples of the projects you had done, and everyone around you, like the people you mentioned, from Evil Ted to Bill Durand, or Frankly Built, and Odin Makes, and SKS Props filled out their booths with different objects made of all sorts of mixed media, and people would just come by, and it was right by that Makerverse area, the workshop area and the workshop stage, and people would just hang out and chat. and it had a very much a Maker Faire vibe to that, where
Yes.
people just got to hang out. There was no agenda. It was just meeting people. It was very informal, and it was very much just a hangout.
It felt so relaxed. I wasn't sure what I was walking into when I got there, but because so many of us knew each other already, and those that didn't know each other rapidly did, it just became very, very comfortable, just like hanging out with your friends at someone's house. And there just so happens to be a whole bunch of cosplayers around. And it was just, honestly, it was one of the best experiences I've ever had at a con, whether it's an actual Comic-Con or a Maker Faire. And I think it was just because of that really relaxed sort of familiarity that existed within the Makerverse. And anywhere we walked, it was pretty much the same way. And I did like how open everything was in that con. It didn't feel like there was this section, this section, this section. It was just, this was the con.
It just flowed right from one side of the hall to the other, with a big 5,000 square foot workshop area in the middle.
Yeah, it was wonderful. The workshop area was so much fun. All the different stuff that was going on over there all the time. And
so, I gotta say, when it sunk in for me, was I was talking to a friend of mine, Banana Steve, who I'm in a cosplay group with. He cosplays. We cosplay in a fast food Avengers cosplay group, and he was pointing at his friend's costume, and he's like, okay, so I learned this technique from Odin. I learned this technique from Sophie. I learned this technique, and just pointed to different parts of the costume and was like, so I watched their videos to understand how to make this. I watched his video to understand how to make this pattern. I watched this video to understand how to like dye clothing. And it like all of a sudden like clicked together to me about how all these makers like influence people in totality, not just individually. And that resulted in people building these cosplays. And in a way, like I go to cons so much to see like what are the mashups. The mashup that was there was like the Maker mashup, and that was beautifully on display in the Makerverse area, where you'd see makers working side by side with some of the OGs of prop making, and doing ridiculous stuff. Like, when will you see Evil Ted Smith, who is literally the OG, like trying to build an alien spacesuit with Joel Telling, like on a Saturday night, and they're just going for it. It was that kind of like mashup, but in the spirit of Maker Faire, that really was just so enthralling and so uplifting.
Yeah, that was, it was such an odd thing, because I was down on the floor building a spacesuit as well while that was going on, and then Ben Eadie is painting himself red and making himself look like Mork from Mork and Mindy, and then he decides to hug me while covered in wet red paint. It did feel a lot like a Maker Faire, but at the same time it was a con, and it was that familiarity that everybody had with each other that just made it that much more fun.
Yeah, and even though the weekend went by really fast, it's really anchored in my memory with all the great cosplay and the great moments that stuck out. So have to give a shout out to all the tested viewers and members who stopped by our booth and said hi, not just during Adam's autograph sessions, but also we had a nice meet and greet. We had tested contributors there, and so a lot of premium members, a lot of patrons were able to come by and hang out and see some of the things. I mean, we were actually really surprised. For us, really fun to see for you guys, because we make the channel. We see some of these props day to day in the studio, but people were freaking out at the foil ball, the tin foil ball that that Adam hammered, the aluminum foil ball that Adam hammered, and that we water jet in half. We had that on display. People were freaking out about that. A lot of people loved. Jen Checker had her book nook, her inspired by Narnia wardrobe book nook, and I just forget, like, there are a lot of people who maybe don't know what book nooks are, or maybe this is the first time they've seen one of this style, and people are taking pictures of that. And even some of the dioramas that, Kate and I, and miniatures that Kate and I had painted and made up, we did those in display, and people really enjoyed those. So a lot of great new fans, a lot of great things for existing fans of the channel. But what were your favorite, like, just cosplays or sites and favorite memories from the show?
I think one of my favorite memories from the show was when I first got my booth set up, and you guys were getting the tested booth finished, And I walked over there, and Adam's spacesuit was there from the little short film that he'd done at Fawnco. And I've been friends with Fawn Davis for a while. So I'd been on that set where they filmed it. And I was kind of like, it was kind of fun to see that in person. But also, I think the day or 2 days before, Adam had posted his preview of what his incognito cosplay was going to be. And I had a strong suspicion that it was McCready, because it looked exactly like an M9A1 flamethrower tank. And I walked up and saw the flamethrower, and I was like, I was right. And I knew that at some point he'd be walking around as McCready. Unfortunately, I didn't see him. I think I was doing a panel when he was doing that, but it was fun to see that. And then like yours and Kate's models that were up there. So I started as a model maker. So I am just absolutely fascinated by miniature work, and I absolutely loved it. And I got to meet and do a panel with Kate later, and I've been watching her work for quite a long time as well. So it was fun to just meet a model maker of her skill level. And then as far as the cosplays walking around, there was a young lady. I'm a huge fan of The Fifth Element, and if you saw my booth, you would know that. Walking around as one of the McDonald's employees from The Fifth Element. And it was really well done. And I'm so sorry to her. Names are so hard for me. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. And I'll try and remember.
Designs, if I
yes, I think it's Dila. I have my phone in front of me. I could look it up while we're talking.
Kishore, how about you? What were some of your favorite moments in cosplays that you saw?
Wow. So I'm gonna go a little off the beaten path here. So Shohreh Aghdashloo from The Expanse was there.
Yes.
There's this moment when NASA Ames was there, and they had scientists that had been working on elements of the Artemis mission, which should launch this upcoming weekend. And 3 of the scientists spoke Farsi, and Shohreh came to the NASA booth and was speaking in Farsi with these scientists, and they were just having a moment. And I was like, that feels like important. What like we're watching there, and they're doing it under the banner of NASA. There's like a giant NASA logo over them as they're having this conversation. I live for that kind of stuff. That was awesome. I'll tell you, I walked in, I'd done a change, and I was walking in from the parking garage, and I saw Shelley Carver, a video of Shelley and Mikey's amazing cosplay from Rise of Skywalker, one of the
Albrecht, the Sith metalsmith.
Yeah, yes. I literally didn't even know that character's name. I was just
no
like,
one did. Don't worry.
Yeah,
no one did. 5 seconds on screen.
But it was so Shelley and Mikey were both sitting down because they had been walking around, and they were both just already like cosplay tired, where you have to like sit against a wall somewhere because you're like overheating. And they were doing that. And Shelley waved and was like, "Is that Kishore?" And like waves me over. And we hadn't seen each other in like 3 years since the before times. And I highlight like, because she like then stands up and just in the most proud way like takes me through what you saw in that video with Norm earlier this week. And that again is like one of those kind of like special moments where you get to actually experience somebody's costume through how they built it. The person that won the costume contest, we've known her for a while, Sarah Parker. I've known her from Dragon Con for a number of years. She wore the Horizon West outfit.
Aloy,
and her and her partner were there, and they were just talking about like how they were just rushing the kind of spear build towards the end, and we're telling me that's what I love. How about you, Norm?
Yes, for sure. The cosplays, those moments were great. It was great. There was a after party on Saturday where it was after all the tension of the build up for the first day of the convention. It felt like the great release where everyone got to hang out, and Max Kaiserman, who of Lunar Replicas, and his team all matching, replica jackets or light blue jackets. You've seen Adam wear them untested before. They were all in force at the party, which was great. Cosplays wise, deep cut. Adam mentioned this on the live stream earlier today, but the deep cut a Bay Area cosplay, which was the Winchester Mystery Mansion. Yes. Do you know about this? Do you know about the Winchester Mystery House, Mike?
I do not.
Oh, you got to Google it. It's in San Jose, so it was like real local history. But it's a famous piece of architecture that's kind of like our local strange, weird, haunted building that you can get tours in, but built by, I think, the widow of the Winchester, the guy who invented the Winchester rifle. And there's whole ghost stories behind it. But the house has stairways that lead to nowhere, and all sorts of interesting architectural elements. It's a mystery house in the truest form of the word, and someone cosplayed as it.
as the house itself.
As the house itself, yes.
That's fantastic.
I didn't count, the 13 candles on the chandelier or anything, but yeah, it's like that kind of strange. Like it's a local piece of local color, local interest.
Well, this was my first time in San Jose, so perhaps next year, if I'm able to come back to Silicon, I'll go check that out because it does sound quite fascinating.
There was also a cosplayer. Her name, Gabriella Reynosa, who on the first day, she and her friend were cosplaying as, well, they were in, I gotta get this right, it was Renaissance-inspired costuming. And so imagine all the structure and the form of a Renaissance dress, a Renaissance gown with formal wear that her friend was wearing, but it was all made to look like meat and flesh.
So I saw them.
Eyeballs,
that was amazing.
And teeth.
Yes.
She called it the Duchess of a Dozen Eyes and her Duke. And she made both those costumes, and it looked like sewn flesh, like sewn skin. It was very, it was right out of a horror film, like right out of a Clive Barker book or something.
No, it was absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
And it was one of those things that the closer you looked, the more weirded out and grotesque it looked, which was her goal. But the coolest thing, I mean, and the reason it's a great moment in memories, because we did an interview with her and learned about the costume, and that was on Saturday. And on Sunday, we saw someone walking by our booth, and Adam mentioned this also on the live stream, and it was in a xenomorph queen, but dressed like Queen Elizabeth, an Elizabethan xenomorph queen. And we called the cosplayer over, and it was Gabby again. It was the same cosplayer. That was her Sunday costume. And so she has this wonderful mashup of formal wear, historical formal wear, with something from pop culture or something that's truly disturbing. And that was probably my favorite of the show. She was the best of show for me.
It's amazing. I did see the Queen in passing, like from a distance, because I kept getting pulled all over the place on Sunday. But I did see the Duke and Duchess of was it what they call themselves? The Duke and
Duchess of a Dozen Eyes and her Duke.
Eyes. They were fantastic. Yeah.
We should shout out the droid builders. There's always droid builders.
Oh yeah.
Here, but Matt Hobbs's Wally, always a hit. Just so much character. But I think the real kind of like stunner to me was Size BB-8. It was just it was impeccable, that BB-8. Like, and I think BB-8 had the most selfies taken with it of anything at the con. Like, Adam, no, not even close. It was definitely BB-8.
Cy DeLacy, who is works in animation at Pixar, a technical director, I believe, at Pixar. So I think she's on one of the series about Disney characters and how people embrace fandom and do builds. But she and her teammate Chris Stroud, I believe, all the way here from North Carolina. So remote collaboration on this BB-8, not even their first BB-8 that they've built, but it was like it reached like peak BB-8 in terms of its mechanics. So smooth, the motion. Their whole thing, as engineers, as designers, was about making sure it not only could balance, because that's maybe a solvable problem for BB-8 builders these days, but made sure that this BB-8 could have a personality that could be puppeted and could interact with the children and adults that came up to it. And there was a moment that I think the BB-8 and the Wally, or maybe just the BB-8, went on stage with Adam right before they did the ISS panel, right before they did a video chat with the International Space Station.
Yeah,
Amazing.
astronaut Shel Lindgren was up there, and they had a short conversation. And then, in one of the most fantastic ways to end the panel, Shel Lindgren basically squeezes out some water as it's floating around, and does like a flip and sucks in the water as a sphere. And it's like, thanks for joining us. That's your mic drop from space.
Oh, good times, good times. We'll have a bunch of videos from the show rolling out this week and next week. But all the people we mentioned, we'll include some links to where you can find them. All the makers, of course, including Mike, so you can check out their channels and what they are getting a chance to post from the show. I also want to give a special shout out to Beverly Downen and her husband Brett, who set up his photography. His basically doing photo shoots of cosplayers and just making them look heroic and incredible. Anyone who wanted a photo, they could schedule it. And Brett and his assistant Alex were spent the whole weekend taking photos. Yeah.
Before we move on, I have to say one thing. I'd known this fact, but it was really apparent when you visit Mike's booth. He brought a bunch of Fifth Element stuff, as you like to say, and you showed the stones. All three of them, right?
Yep.
You gotta tell the story. Like, I loved it because like every time you told that story, I could see somebody being like, what? And they like their minds were blown just briefly.
So for some of the stones, and I don't think that this translates to every single version of it, because there's numerous variations of the 4 stones from the Fifth Element that are used throughout the film. I think it's hard to pin down a number, but there's upwards of from anywhere from 6 to 12 different sculpts of the stones used throughout the production of the film. And the ones that are carried around inside the tuxedo after he removes them from Plava Laguna, there's only 3 sculpts because they just turned the other one upside down. And that gives you the 4th stone. And the ones that I have are actually cast from those. And there's only actually 3 different sculpts, and you just make a 4th one and flip it upside down, and then you have all 4 stones. And from a couple of people that worked on the production, they said that wasn't uncommon because they just made those super fast and put them out on set. And then the scene was shot, and that was part of the end of it. And as far as I understand, there's only a couple of sets of those actual screen used stones left. And one of them I know is owned by Luke Besson, or at least the last I heard it was. But they're exceptionally rare things. But I do love to tell people that story that like, yep, there's only actually 3 stones, not 4, at least from that specific set.
The other thing I loved is because you cast this from it was cast from the mold. You can see a fingerprint, like a thumbprint or something on one of the stones. Like, yeah,
I don't know the story behind the thumbprint, but I'm hoping one day I'll find out. And I'm trying to pin down who it was that actually sculpted those, because it seems that there were several sculptors used as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a perfect way to transition into talking about the work you do, Mike, and props to history in general. I mean, you have a YouTube channel, but as Kishore mentioned, you're very present and popular on TikTok. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about your journey making the channel, making this type of content, and prop making in general, and some of the fun stories you've been able to share.
Well, like I said, I started out as a model maker when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. Like so many kids did. I started making model kits. And over time, that went from just making plastic scale model kits into scratch building and trying to replicate things that you couldn't find kits for. And for a little while, I made models for some museums, and I competed as a model maker, and that fell by the wayside as I got a little older. But it wasn't until probably 2017, 2018, that someone asked me if I could build a costume for a horse, which I did. And I built an AT-AT costume for a 2,000-pound Clydesdale. And that opened the door. It's a picture that circulates on the internet like every Halloween and May the 4th. And it went viral, and I kind of thought that was fun. And I had always loved film, and filming models were always something I was very, very attached to. And I started going away from building models and then trying to replicate props. And it just stayed as a hobby. But having come from being a model maker, research is very much a part of it. And I was researching as much as I could, more and more and more and more, as I became obsessive about making props more and more accurate. And one day a coworker said, "Hey, you should put this on TikTok, what you do on TikTok." And I thought to myself, TikTok is an app for teenagers. Why would I do that? And I fought against it for a while until I decided, okay, I'll try it. I'd used Instagram before and Twitter, etc., but it never went anywhere. I posted my very first video on TikTok about a year and a half ago, and it was about the Book of the Dead and how it is associated with something in real history. And it went viral almost immediately. It was something like 7 million views in 2 days. And I thought, well, maybe people are actually interested in this. And I started from there to share my passion for not only the props themselves and how they were made, but also who made them. Mm-hmm. And that has led to me making a lot of connections in the industry itself, and then getting the stories of these prop makers that made all this stuff. I've been able to interview the artists who created Vigo the Carpathian. They actually painted the painting. They created all of the concept art, created his costume. And I've been to their home. I've interviewed them. The interviews on YouTube. Max Cervantes, who created the Starship Trooper armor. He's the carousel hat from Beetlejuice, along with Mike Moore. I've been to Mike Moore's shop. It's just the number of people that I've been able to meet because of this. I've become friends with Fawn Davis. I've been to Fawnco Studios numerous times. Earl Hayes Press, just you name it. It's just all of these wonderful doors open because I just wanted to tell people stories.
Yeah.
And it's now turned into, I just want to tell the stories of the people that literally make movie magic, and no one else is telling the story. And I think that's a shame.
And absolutely. And I think growing up, we see the credits or these folks maybe in like a Cinefex or in an old Starlog magazine or something, right? And there was definitely like an aura of like magic around them. Like these were the practical effects wizards, right? And you naming some like makeup artist like a Rick Baker or like a Michael Westmore, right? Like these are folks who like you never felt like you could ever even get close to that. They live in a different world, but it turns out like they're happy to tell their stories. It's the same thing we found over the years doing Tested, because no one else is telling their stories, and they were all like a lot of them just work for hire, and they didn't know that there's a fan base out there that's interested, and they're more than happy to do it.
And I was quite surprised how open so many of them were, because I think a lot of them, they really like to talk about the work they've done, because they've done some amazing stuff. Some absolutely cool things have been built for film that were on screen for 7 seconds, and then that's the last you saw of it until it, went and got hidden in an archive. And a big part of this started because Prop Store reached out to me, and we started going back and forth, and I went out and I promoted one of their auctions. So I got access to all of these props. And then that's opened the door to prop houses, prop rental houses, as they're sometimes called, different collectors. And now I regularly do promotional stuff with prop stores. So I'm able to get up close to these hyper rare pieces from film history. Like most recently that I was out in LA for their VIP thing with the X-Wing that sold for over $1 million.
Oh yeah. What a beautiful
find. I know you guys were there too. And it was to just be able to get close to this stuff and tell the story of it and what was used to build it. Almost no one knows this. And there's such unbelievably fascinating stories. And when you start to delve into the path that some of these things have taken in their life and still survive from back in the day when things were just tossed in the trash, and which was very common at one point, unfortunately, and so much has been lost because of it. But I'm utterly fascinated by that side of film history, and it's now sort of taken over my life. So,
do you have any favorites? Like some props that you've told stories about over the last year and a half that really stick with you?
Yes, actually, it's one of my favorite stories to illustrate a number of things. One, how Hollywood treated props at one time, and then also the strange path that things can take. And it's the filming model from 1977's Star Wars, A New Hope. And they only made one full-size filming model of the Death Star. When I say full size, I mean about 4 feet in diameter, 3.5, 4 feet in diameter. And at the end of production, everything went into storage. And, in between the end of production and release of the film, can be a long period of time. Well, somebody decided they didn't want to keep it in storage anymore for whatever reason. And there's multiple reasons that I've heard as to why. And they said, throw it all in the trash. And one of the guys that worked at the storage facility liked the Death Star and took it home to his mom's house in Missouri, where she put it out in front of her antique store outdoors in the weather for a couple of years until it was purchased by a country and western honky tonk, where it ultimately ended up being used as a trash can because the laser dish had long since disappeared and it had a perfect hole to throw garbage in. And finally, someone who knew what it was able to get their hands on it. And then ultimately, it ended up in the hands of a collector who had it fully restored. And now it sits in their foyer most of the time, completely restored behind glass. Or it goes to museums on occasion. But it survived being thrown in the trash and ultimately ended up as a trash can. And that's how the Death Star survived, for the world to keep it and have it as a treasure of film history. And it's just an illustration of what can happen, because at that time so much was just discarded.
We hear that story so many times, and and for people who are other collectors or people who work in the the props restoration or the auction trade, it becomes a whole investigation into the authenticity, into the provenance of, and it's not just a studio will be offloading props for when a production ends, which is often the case these days, because storage is expensive and it's how they recoup some of the costs. But those are kind of the best stories, where someone finds a costume or a prop in with a film shot in the UK, just in someone's garden or something, because it was kept there.
Like Gozer's from the first Ghostbuster, Gozer's costume, which was mostly bubble wrap that it started life as, was found in a thrift store by somebody, and not too long ago, if I recall. And that's how it survived. Just somebody took it home from set, and it just ended up going through so many hands until it ended up at a thrift store. Dorothy's dress that happened to be in a church storage facility for so long. And it's just amazing the things that these props go through and manage to survive. And it begs the question of what else is hiding out there.
Did you see lately? Something went viral maybe on Twitter. It was Sylvester Stallone's frozen body from Demolition Man.
Yes,
that surfaced in Australia in an antique store.
Yes,
and it was and so in Demolition Man, both he and Wesley Snipes are frozen and sent to and cryogenically frozen to the future. And so they had a full body naked Sylvester Stallone with like a modesty covering, but a full face sculpt with either punched hair or some type of hair, but it was behind plexi or however it was in the film, never meant to be up close. And the story is that among many of the other props from Stallone films, it went to a Planet Hollywood restaurant. Because that was a big franchise in the 90s. A lot of Arnold's props, a lot of props from those films in the late 80s and the early 90s went in the ceilings or the walls of Planet Hollywood. And there was one in Australia which shut down or it went for renovation, and that was a prize ceiling prop, which I don't even want to imagine the kind of like food grease that had accumulated over the years, but then made its way out of storage in some antique store. And the way it was displayed looked like it was a dummy used for like a historical reenactment for like a torture device or something.
It looked much worse than that, because it's like what if you have to make a model of Sylvester Stallone waking up from a 1,000-year nap, but you have to do it really fast. like just imagine how messed up the face looks. You
Right.
can recognize it's Sylvester Stallone, but it's like nightmare Sylvester Stallone.
You have 3 days to make a naked Sylvester Stallone that looks like he's in ice. Go.
That's right. Without any scan of that era, no life cast, no 3D scan that you can do these days. It's just someone sculpting it real fast.
Yep.
Before we move on, last one from me. Like, you're not only a prop history storyteller, you also make and collect props yourself. Do any from your collection stick out to you? Like, and you actually, as we mentioned earlier, brought a bunch to Silicon as well. I'm curious if you have any favorites that you want to tell us about.
I have two pieces when people ask me what my favorites are, and one of them is rather mundane looking. It's a radio out of a helicopter, and there's nothing special about it except for me, it's the very first prop I ever made that wound up on screen. I was hired to work on Magnum PI season 4, which, believe it or not, there was a reboot of Magnum PI. Most people are unaware it even exists. And I was tasked to make a helicopter radio that a bad guy would deactivate in some way that made no sense, because I worked in aviation for 17 years, so it made no sense to me. But it doesn't matter. It's Hollywood. They can do what they want. And it's my first piece that ever wound up on screen. And the prop master knew that, and he sent it back to me when the production was done. So there's that. And then the Book of the Dead, which I have, over the last year, obsessed about. And I've made very hyper accurate, or as accurate as I can with the information available, replicas of. And I finished my, quite frankly, my best one I've ever done, and I brought it to Silicon, and it was on display in the Maker Museum, along with its twin, the Book of Amun-Ra, the gold one. And then on the way home, the TSA decided to inspect the container and crushed both books beyond repair.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry that story doesn't have a happy ending as of yet. And I know it's something you'll probably have to rebuild. And we got to see them behind on the display in the kind of the Maker Museum that was set up at Silicon. Gorgeous. This is from, of course, The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser, Richard Weisz film, Stephen Sommers from '98, I believe. But both of those just incredible props that you painstakingly created, from the key to the covers, the ornate covers of those, just so beautiful.
It was
locking and binding mechanisms on them.
It was such a pain. It was myself and my friend Greg Nowling we worked together on these to make them what they are, and now this has kind of spurred me on, along with a conversation I had with Adam while I was there at Silicon. I've been slowly toying with making a completely working book with pages, with a functioning key, functioning lock, every function you see on screen, which was actually done by multiple props, working in one book. And I'm very, very close to having it done. And this is sort of an impetus for me to finish it so that I can actually have my books back, basically, since I don't have them now.
Why that prop? Because no one's gonna talk about the Mummy 100 years from now as the all-time classic.
Oh, come on! It is a modern classic. The Mummy is.
For sure,
I'm not hating on the movie.
I'm gonna miss you as a friend.
I'm really not hating on the movie. I'm just saying, like, it's not like the top 5 like all-time sci-fi movies that come to mind.
Oh, it is so perfectly pulpy.
It is super pulpy.
It is. It's absolutely perfectly pulpy. That's a wonderful description of it. And I feel like it's also very much a film of its time, that it was the right movie at the right time. And it was just, every element of it works together. Now, it's not the perfect film, but it's just as a standalone popcorn muncher, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And my obsession with the Book of the Dead actually started when I bought a resin casting of one of the stunt books. And it's like any other stunt prop. It doesn't look great up close. You can see all the mistakes and everything in it. And that started yet another obsession of having that perfect version of the book. and I've gotten to this point with the books that you saw, and I want to take it that step further and make it more perfect and make it completely functional in a way that I think only one prop ever was built that was fully functional. And I just want to have that.
I'm going to take issue with it not being a perfect movie, because I do think it is a perfect movie for what it set out to be, and it was released right at the the kind of the intersection of the peak model making and practical effects, plus the emergence of believable digital effects with digital characters. In the Mummy character, it is a spiritual successor, I think, to the Indiana Jones films. It has a little bit of Lawrence Arabia in it. Jerry Goldsmith's theme to that is incredibly iconic. I think it's some Stephen Sommers' best work. He'd go on to do the likes of the G.I. Joe films and things like that. But it was that the kind of the late '90s blockbuster, peak blockbuster, and perfectly cast. Introduced us to Rachel Weisz, who's of course had an incredible career, and Brendan Fraser, also peak Brendan Fraser, who's now having a resurgence. He's like a cartoon character. He's like in that, the way he bounces around has so much this slapstick. But yeah, I love that film.
Well, in fairness, every character in The Mummy is kind of a cartoon character. They are that, and I agree with everything you say, but I don't know. There's some parts about the movie that kind of bother me, and it's only the physics that I see with the film.
Not as bad as the second one, when he's literally outrunning.
There are a few things as bad as the second one.
Yes. Yeah. I'll tell you, if you love that film, one of the props that I think there is an RPF thread about some people trying to remake it. It's his gun bag that he rolls out on the boat in the boat scene. I was what, $150 within buying the actual screen used bag. Oh my gosh.
Yes. I lost the bid. I looked away from the screen. I had to go do something. I came back and it had ended and I'd lost it by $150. I was so close to owning the screen used bag. It's one of the few props the screen used pieces that I've ever tried to get that I kick myself for not sticking to it.
Yeah, for people who don't know, there's a great scene as O'Connell and his the rivals all searching for Hamunaptra are on this it's a quiet scene, right? It's a night scene. They're on a boat, right? It's a classic adventuring scene. You see it in the likes of King Kong, and it's lots of fun slapsticky stuff with him and Evelyn, Rachel Weisz's character, and it's just like a full strut where they're having a conversation, and he's not even looking at what he's doing, but he unfurls out this incredible gun bag and starts fixing and repairing and cleaning his guns. And so not only is it I don't think it's whether it's based on a real thing, it must have been custom made for the movie. I mean, you would know, Mike, but
yeah, it was definitely a custom made piece. But I do love that was, and I'm sorry to go on about this, but one of my favorite things about The Mummy is I'm a big stickler about historical accuracy. And every single firearm within that film was historically accurate to the period.
Yes.
Which a lot of movies, they don't pay that close of attention to. They go, well, that'll do. And then they move on from it. And I that part of it really tickled me because of it. And there were so many wonderful little details in the movie. But it's just some of the physics bothers me, and that's pretty much it.
If this wasn't the perfect ad for our new podcast next week that looks at The Mummy minute by minute, I don't know what is. I think you're turning me around on this movie.
It well worth rewatching. Great movie for its time.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Let's move on to a little bit of some pop culture and tech news before we wrap up the show. In the world of the MCU, we had announcement. I don't know if you watch a lot of MCU, Mike, but we are big fans here, Kishore and I, and we're enjoying the spit out of She-Hulk. Third episode, I guess, by the time people listen to this, will have aired. But they're working on a Wonder Man show, and it's been announced that Ben Kingsley, Trevor Slattery's character, will return in Wonder Man.
I've watched all of Miss Marvel, and that's kind of where I've stopped because I had a whole bunch of work come in that I had to do. So I haven't had a chance to watch She-Hulk yet. but I saw this morning, and I absolutely love Ben Kingsley, and I love his character Trevor. And I really want to see something that surrounds that wonderful, hilarious character of his.
Yes, Mike, your law of Mike might have dropped as well. Yeah, we're losing your audio just a little bit. Kishore, what do you think?
He was so exceptional in Iron Man, and even the one shot, he was fantastic. Return in Shang-Chi, dynamic again. Yeah, sign me up for Oscar-winning, one of the greatest actors of our generation, Ben Kingsley, showing up in the MCU. I'm still not over the fact that Nathan Fillion's not going to be Wonder Man.
Oh no, they got to cast an unknown. I don't think they can cast a known character. It has to be some type of character actor. And what it tells me though is that this is going to be a comedy. It tells me that just like She-Hulk, they're fully embracing the comedic elements and doing like a sitcom, right? Marvel's first sitcom. This is going to be in that vein, and it also tells me that it lays this for the groundwork to bring back Wanda, because Wanda and Wonder Man in the comics have a relationship, and this could be a way for them to bring that in.
I kind of figure Simon Williams is going to be like Joey from Friends. He's going to be an actor that plays somebody like that, and then superheroes at night. That's my sort of guess.
Yeah.
I do really hope that he says "How you doing" to somebody at some point.
Don't put it past Kevin Feige.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's right. We're also big Star Trek fans here, of course. We're looking very forward to season 3 of Star Trek Picard. They're going to get it right this time. They're going to get it right this time.
Are they?
Well, they've already filmed it.
See.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's okay, because Strange New Worlds is so good that I'll be okay being disappointed by Picard season 3. Although they got all the original cast back, and the news just broke that Denise Crosby, who played Tasha Yar, will return in some form as Tasha Yar in season 3.
Will it be Tasha Yar though?
I don't think they're gonna do
Romulan daughter.
No.
Yeah.
That would be too much to bring. That would be so much of a deep cut to have to explain. And this, I think, fundamentally is one of the issues with Picard is they don't lean into the fan service. They're running the show as if it has to stand on its own with a lot of new characters and explaining a lot of things, but it's a show that really should lean into the fan service.
Agreed. Are they going to then go with interdimensionality then? Because they've already touched on interdimensionality in the first season. Is it going to be Tasha Yar from another dimension, or how? Do you have a theory on how they're going to bring that character in?
Maybe they'll do season 1 Data and Tasha Yar hooking up again, or make Picard relive all of his worst moments. And we just watch her on a loop get killed by that goo being. There's so many choices.
True.
However they do it, I think the gesture, the idea to write her back in, says to me that they want to do a proper. This will feel like a more definitive farewell to that era of Next Generation, and maybe it won't be for all the cast members, because maybe it'll leave some groundwork for some of that cast to pop up in future Star Trek shows, whatever may come, but it'll be done for Patrick Stewart, and all good things, as perfect of a finale as it was for Next Generation, told a very specific story, and they already did Q again in season 2 of Picard. So this is kind of their time. They've given another chance to wrap up Next Generation and to give us the member berries, and they never really went back to Tasha Yar. No Dr. Pulaski though. Right? No call back to that. No.
That's not necessary. Not at all.
Yeah. That whole season we don't talk about. We also have D23 next weekend, and so that's the big Disney Expo. Of course, at Comic-Con there was all the MCU announcements. Here we're going to see all the Disney films, all the Disney Plus stuff. It also, I believe, it's right after they're going to drop Thor: Love and Thunder on Disney Plus, as well as I want to say Pinocchio as well. Is that right? Pinocchio film.
Oh, that's nightmare fuel. That looked awful.
Yeah. Well, they're fully leaning into some of the more horror aspects of because that film, I haven't watched the original animated show or movie.
My
It's kind of
understanding
scary.
is that the story it's based on is actually quite terrifying too. I've not read it, but it is, as I understand, quite terrifying. So
Yeah.
be
I mean,
curious to see what they pull from that.
This is prepping us for the Winnie the Pooh horror movie
Oh,
that
yes.
the trailer just dropped for. So I don't think I'm in, but I respect it where they're trying to go.
Well, it tells you everything you need to know that film, even directed by Robert Zemeckis, and with the all the special effects and it's big names, Cynthia Erivo as the Blue Fairy, that is going straight to Disney Plus. So not in theaters. Yeah.
I am excited for Kevin Feige to get up there and fill in some of the blanks that were left on the calendar after San Diego Comic-Con. I think we're gonna get Fantastic Four casting on
And
stage.
director, probably. Yep. That would be the right moment. Will they go even further and bring on some mutants?
I don't think so. I think I think Jonathan Majors though.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Really set up the big villain for phase 4. We're reaching a lot of peak television. We're going to reach saturation because we're going to have, Wednesday nights will be Andor from Star Wars, right? On Disney. Thursday, She-Hulk. You got Lord of the Rings, which is tomorrow, right?
Yep.
On Amazon, and the early reviews are very good. And a breather on Saturday nights, and then Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon on Sunday nights. So almost every day of the week.
A friend of mine has seen the first 2 episodes. They were invited to see the first 2 episodes of the Rings of Power, and over the moon about it.
Okay.
So,
was it a theatrical screening?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm really curious about that because obviously Amazon is not the production that delivers the version of the film or the version of the episodes to Amazon is delivering for streaming, and Amazon processed it for Prime streaming. So optimized for Dolby Vision, 4K HDR, which it has. But are they delivering assets that would be basically what a studio would deliver or a production company would deliver for a studio film, to be in the big screen? Because I went to a movie recently, and there was a Rings of Power like special featurette, and maybe it was just the special featurette, but whatever they showed on the big theatrical screen, it didn't look good. It just looked like little, like not exactly pixelated, but it just didn't look filmic in some way. And maybe it was because it wasn't the actual content, but I like. There's
could be maybe not fully finished yet, and that's the featurette, because some of the stuff when they first started showing early trailers, early like sneak peeks of it, you could tell there was a lot that wasn't quite done yet. So maybe that's what you saw.
Yeah,
because I know they're working on it right up to the last second.
Yeah, maybe the thing is, and people who work in production, who work in final the post production, really, when they deliver a film or when they screen it for the filmmakers, you have the very stereotypical vision of filmmakers sitting in a screening room watching the film, taking notes, but in the lockdown, in the pandemic times, people have to, and we air interviews with film editors all the time. They edit on their big screen TVs, and a lot of films these days are made for streaming, for Netflix and HBO Max and Amazon Prime, where it never will ever have a version that is seen on the big screen. And there's fundamentally, I think, a difference in either when they're making it, the composition, or the way they light it, or the way that maybe it's the cameras used. But I think there is a different feeling to some of those films, which is yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you, because I feel like there is some stuff that just would not translate to the big screen.
Yeah.
And I agree with you 100% on that. And I hadn't really thought about it till you said it. So,
and maybe it's the pace of the storytelling too. And we know Lord of the Rings is infamously a very extended story, right? But it was also, the director's cut was made to be watched in one sitting. Yeah. all 4 hours of it, right? And here, these are going to be presumably hour-long episodes. So even the pace of storytelling kind of will dictate the look and feel or the relationship the viewer has with the content here. Very curious. I'm very excited, but also,
Yes.
I'm bracing myself to not necessarily. I think in my mind, going to be closer to Game of Thrones than what it felt like to watch Lord of the Rings in the theaters 20 years ago.
I hope that it's not like Game of Thrones, where they absolutely butcher the last 2 seasons for no reason.
Well, I'm just saying, we're talking about production quality or the kind of storytelling, right?
No, I got you.
Yeah. Doing lots of interwoven threads, right?
Yeah.
Which Lord of the Rings also had, but here a chance to have a ton of characters. I think there were well over a dozen characters. They had that Comic-Con panel, just all the portraits of all the actors as they brought them up on stage.
I know they say they'll never do it, but isn't it time for Tom Bombadil to make his appearance in the Lord of the Rings universe? No one wants to see Tom Bombadil but me.
I'd be curious. Like, I would wonder how you would incorporate him into storytelling.
Not well, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a good way to actually incorporate him into film, unless you just portrayed him as the narrator of a 45-hour-long Silmarillion or Silmarillion.
I always see him as Josh Groban, though, so I'm holding out hope.
Wow, the time might be past for that, or might be ripe for that. Yeah, I don't know. All right, we're going to move on and wrap up the show with a little bit of technology. We're not going to talk about the Apple event because that's next week, and who knows? New iPhones, maybe some AR, VR. If they do, next week will be a very interesting episode.
Far Out was an interesting name, though. So I'm curious. Expectations not high, though.
No, maybe it's a extra long zoom lens on their. You can see things far out. Who knows? But the big kind of technology story, not just this past week, but kind of it's been brewing, and it's definitely surfacing a lot on social media. If you follow people who work in AI and artists, is AI generated art. Things like the DALL-E 2 and Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, maybe some of these services and programs that you've heard of. And if you haven't heard of it, you may have definitely seen the art. So we need to get an expert on here at some point to talk about it. But the way I understand it is these are basically using their algorithms. These are services that have scraped or they've trained an AI model using a library of thousands and thousands or millions of images for which they've sourced on the internet. These images have descriptors tied to them, so either have been categorized or labeled or tagged, as a stock photo would be, or they've been, captioned as a part of a blog. And all this input data teaches the program basically a way to generate from a text prompt, an image that looks very much not just of the subject that the text prompt you type in, but also a creative art style, a very creative art style. And I'm not going to pretend to understand. I know how these algorithms work and how they work differently, even to generate wildly different art styles, and some are better at certain things, but the end result is extremely effective. Sure, I'm sure you've seen them. And Mike, you said you've even dabbled in some AI generated art before.
Yeah, there's a feature on TikTok that allows you to play with an AI art generator, and it's based just like what you were talking about on a phrase. And I spent quite a bit of time playing with it because it's just fascinating to see what is generated, and some of it's quite beautiful, and it gives you the mental image of what you prompted it to, but some of it's straight up nightmare fuel, and it's not pleasant to look at all. So it's really dependent on the phrase and apparently the mood of the AI of what you get. And I don't pretend to understand how it works at all, but I did enjoy it for quite a bit, and went to bed really late because of it.
My brain is so it just turns to mush because I read about these things called diffusion models. And so that's how some of these work. And basically, they've trained the system to have an understanding of, what objects should look like, what an art style should look like. And from these diffusion models, they basically take randomly sampled noise and start denoising them iteratively. And you go from what looks like a static screen to then looking like a painted picture or a photograph of someone. And because the models from every pass of denoising, they're saying this is closer and closer and closer to what I think the prompt is asking for. But because the starting point is noise and it's random noise, the way they denoise is different every time. And that's how a prompt can generate, theoretically, an infinitely different number of visual representations of that prompt.
Because so much of this is modeled after art style, like you said, it really brings up questions around copyright and like fair use, and what is imitation versus just straight stealing somebody's work here, that I don't think has been grappled with at all. And I also like some of these like renderings are very much like what you would find on DeviantArt, like back in the day. They remind me of that kind of like art style, and we can't be far away from like a marketplace selling AI generated images like that.
Oh, I mean,
I think that's already happening, actually.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is there's a lot of creative input in how people manipulate the prompts, right? And there's creativity, absolutely, in people what they prompt the system with. And it's interesting. Andy Bio of Waxy.org has done a big dive and created actually try to explore where the source libraries are, and the different services. Not all of them have been transparent about what their source libraries are, because that's kind of, along with their algorithm, that is their secret sauce that makes it work. And you're right. There's a lot of assumptions about the ownership of where the source models are, or the source libraries are, whether it's from stock photos, scrubbed from public domain images, scrubbed from blogs, and they're not supposed to be scrubbed from. There's like already legal parameters that give them some direction as to where they can and scrub. So, they don't, there's not pornography on this stuff. And some of the services do explicitly omit, people from generating images based on real life people or art styles. They don't pull from art from living artists, for example. But there's also things like Stable Diffusion, where people can download and run locally on their own computer, and that don't have any of the guardrails, and you can generate representations of people who are still alive, and also images that are not safe for work, to a point where Reddit has already had to shut down subreddits for people posting. These are essentially deepfakes that you can generate on the fly of any type of image, because they have millions of libraries, hundreds of thousands of images in their library that they've trained on. So even with descriptors of just a couple hundred or a couple thousand for a certain specific type of object, they can generate all sorts of different types, near infinite different types of representations of that person, that subject, or that object. It's crazy. And this is just static images too. Like this will eventually move to 3D models, to video, and it really feels like we're at like a hockey stick curve of AI art being really definitely more prevalent than like NFTs, for example.
Well, hurry up so we can quit doing the podcast and they can just AI generate what we talk about every week. Really helped me a lot.
Philosophically, there are some interesting things. There are artists, the game developers I know, that are using AI generated art to generate character art, right? that they're using
Even
for their
the
games.
background art, I imagine, would be more efficiently generated this way.
Yes. So it's already taking, it's allowing people to be more creative and be more creatively expressive in the individual works that they do. But eventually, it also will take away some of the work, that manual work that artists do and are paid for. And there's also a little bit of a weird, like, if you look at the art, as great as some of this looks, you can zoom in and there's imperfections, like text doesn't work right. You can, and detail is only resolved to a certain point, where it's almost very dreamlike in some way when I look at this. And to me, that tells me like it's gonna really screw with our sense of memory, because you basically, with near infinite possibilities and combinations and permutations of these prompts, with the right data sets that they input, you can generate things that look like photos of your family and things, and you can generate out of whole cloth, visual representations of things that never happen, that if you have enough of that data or enough of those images, your brain will start associating that with, like, was this a real thing? And what becomes real and generated, that line becomes thinner and thinner. It's
rather horrifying.
It's really kind of fascinating and scary stuff, and we really are at just the beginning of it. I really would love to hear, if listeners out there, anyone has experience with, using some of these programs. If you're an artist, what you think of them. If you're someone who employs artists, right, or works with artists, how do you see, and not just the scary side, but what do you see as even the interesting and novel and beneficial sides of this technology, even just in the image world, because definitely I'm seeing all sorts of fantastical imagery being shared on social media right now using these programs. It's gonna be fun to talk about, and I'm sure it's the things that we'll be keeping tabs on as it is fast changing. I'll include some links to some of the articles that I've been reading about the AI generated art and some of the interesting examples of it, not just in images, but in video, in the show notes below. But that wraps it up for this episode. We have on the site this week, we have Adam's Incognito from Silicon. We have his one-day build, which is itself, you get to watch Adam die a little bit inside, because he had to do this build twice, and you'll see soon why in the video. This is his McCready costume, the flamethrower that he made for it. And of course, some of the interviews from the show floor will be rolling out this week and next week as well. Mike, where can people find you on the internet, and anything that you want to shout out?
Yes, I can be found anywhere, any social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. At Props to History. I'm kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to everything. I'm on TikTok as at Props to History, and on YouTube, which I'm porting more content to YouTube than anything else, which is once again /Props to History. And my Chicago-based prop fabrication and special effects house is Corazon Studios, CORRISON Studios.com. We're a prop fabrication, special effects fabrication, and rental house here in the city of Chicago.
Amazing.
Thanks for making the time. Thank
you for having me.
I really can't understate how joyous that channel is and how different it is. Like, you don't talk about corn on your channel, which is all that is on TikTok.
That's
right
all
now.
that's on there right now, isn't there?
Yeah. And it really is delightful, because you're just watching somebody who just is completely obsessed with the stories behind these props. And
that's a fair assessment.
And I have to say, whatever is ahead of us, we don't know, but I am really excited about what Silicon will look like next year and beyond. Now it has its footing again, in this sort of full year, seeing more people come, more makers, and just more is kind of my take on it. It was a wonderful experience. Stay safe to all those people that are going to Dragon Con. I know everything is happening. Knock on wood, Artemis launch on Saturday. I think there's only about a 40% chance it actually happens on Saturday because of the weather. I think it's more likely Labor Day. We're going to see our uncrewed launch of Artemis.
If I may, before this ends, I would very much like to thank the both of you for having me on here, and also everyone at Tested that was at Silicon that made the show so simple and that everything go very, very smoothly. And of course, Jen Schachter for everything that she put into it. But thank you guys so much for having me on here. It was quite the surprise to have the folks from Tested say, "Hey, do you want to be on our podcast?" Which was for a nerd who came up with Tested since it started. Was quite it made me kind of giddy, truth be told. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, nothing made me feel older than people at the show coming up and say, we've been watching Tested for 10 years now, and started in middle school / high school, and now is a working professional in some amazing industry.
I started watching it when I was in my 30s, and I, I've only been working in this industry now for maybe a year. So it's, this is all very much becoming part of my wheelhouse, but it was quite the honor, so to speak. It really was for you guys to offer for me to come on the podcast. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mike. We'll include, of course, links to everything you mentioned in the description below. I do have an outro this week, as I say, an oldie, but a goodie. But everyone have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Stay safe, and we will see you next time. If I can get it to play. No. Give me 1 second.
Incredible outro.
Oh my God.
No, this is perfect, actually.
Oh, no.
Awkwardness makes me laugh more than anything.
This will be edited out.
I'll just do my pose.
Oh my God. Let me pick. Here's. Hold on. SoundCloud load. Track was not found. What the hell?
You have to leave this as the outro.
This is the perfect outro.
No outro for you. See y'all
this is a perfect outro.
No, this is perfect. I could, if you'd like, I could end the episode the way I end every one of my videos.
Oh, please do. All right, here we go.
Thank you all for watching. Everyone stay safe. Props to history.